Alright, guys, so welcome back to the Traditionalist channel. This is going to be lecture number 10, Debating the French Revolution. The greatest political event of the 18th century, the French Revolution, inspired numerous political thinkers. In this and the next three lectures, we will trace its philosophical impact. The first round of political argument was the Anglo-American battle of the Pamphlets. Englishman Richard Price published a discourse approving the revolution as an expression of English political principles. Edmund Burke, the classical source of conservatism in Anglo-American politics, argued against Price that the revolution was a violation of English principles. Thomas Paine, the most famous political pamphleteer in American history, supported the revolution against Burke, as did Mary Wollstonecraft. In this lecture, we will follow the Battle of the Pamphlets, the first intellectual skirmish over the meaning of the Revolution. The French Revolution. The French Revolution was the most important political event of the 18th century, far more influential than the American Revolution. What made this revolution particularly influential were the waves of increasing radicalism that ultimately led to its undoing. Starting in June and July of 1789, the bourgeoisie and workers in France rebelled against King Louis XVI, abolishing feudal privileges and the privileges of the Catholic Church, and establishing a constitutional monarchy. Later in 1792 through 93, a republic was declared. Other European powers attacked France, and the king was executed. In 1789, the French Constituent Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, in many ways similar to the American Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights. But in 1793, the radical Jacobin Party took control, and under Robespierre and the infamous Committee of Public Safety, executed tens of thousands of suspected traitors in the Reign of Terror. The Jacobins were replaced in 1795 by the Oligarchy Directory, which lasted until 1799, when Napoleon took control of the estate, establishing himself as emperor in 1804. During this period, France was at war at one time or another with all the other major powers of Europe. Napoleon was finally defeated in 1815, and the Bourbon monarchy was restored. The Battle of the Pamphlets. In the month immediately after the start of the revolution, intellectuals were first to take a stand for or against it. One famous tempest was the so-called Battle of the Pamphlets, involving Richard Price, Edmund Burke, Thomas Paine, and Mary Wollstonecraft. In a discourse on the law of our country, 1789, the English philosopher and cleric Richard Price praised the revolution, believing that the French had fulfilled the promise of the glorious revolution of 1688 more completely than the English had done. Price declared excessive fealty to the king and declared that the king's crown depends on the choice of the people, who have the right to choose their governors and cashier them for misconduct. These views provoked the father of modern conservatism, Edmund Burke. His reflections on the Revolution in France, 1790, was the response to Price, but it became the source of traditionalist conservatism in Anglo-American politics. Burke disavowed the Revolution and any similarity with England. England is free, he said, because of its traditional institutions. He accepted the view that England's freedoms depended on a set of balancing institutions: royalty, nobility, parliament, the church, and the traditional rights of the people. But the proper balance is the result of historical learning, not a philosophical argument from natural rights. History grants traditional freedoms and responsibilities to all citizens and to their rulers, including the king. England's political norms are not deduced from reason or philosophical principles. They are embodied by its historical practices and institutions. Burke rejected democracy and republicanism for England. He denied that government should depend on explicit consent elections. All have rights, but not natural rights. They have the rights that British tradition has historically granted to its people. It is true that the people have the ultimate power, but the people want to be ruled and do not want to see their rulers as elected servants as Price had characterized them. Burke also denied legal equality. These estates have different legal status. It's true that all have equal rights, but not two equal things. Each estate or class has its traditional prerogatives, all of which presume obligations and duties. Burke particularly criticized the social contract theories. Society is not the product of a moment's choice. If there is a contract among the people, it is eternal and unstated and includes the dead and the yet unborn. Political society is like an organism that exists over time. It has traditions that give it legitimacy. The local loyalties of the people, family, neighborhood, and church are what hold the organism together. What Burke most objects to is the attempt of intellectuals backed by men of new money to reform society according to abstract principles of reasoning without concern for tradition. The rule of reason, as it was understood by supporters of the revolution, is actually a kind of despotism. That is, thinkers in their armchairs cannot derive a small set of rational principles to reform all of society. Prejudice, for example, is a good thing. It is prejudgment learned through social tradition. Not all matters can be open to rational decision and inquiry. The cultural meanings of authority The cultural meanings of authority are essential, even if they are not rational demonstrable, and must be passed from generation to generation. The essence of Burke's conservatism can be described as follows: authority, rank, and inequality are good when deserved and legitimate. Social life is made possible by a cultural softening of the harsh facts of power and nature. Submission to the elegant and dutiful is a virtue, and each finds respect in that unequal relation. The new bourgeoisie men want to reduce us to animal equality and tear away the prairie that makes life livable and honorable. Burke was a conservative, but not rigid, believing that change is inevitable. His conservatism was devoted to maintaining the goods of current society, which will be different when applied to different societies. He approved of the American Revolution, believing that the Crown had violated the traditional rights of Americans. He also disapproved the treatment of India by the British East India Company, and he accepted Smith's view on the economy and the desirability of free trade over protectionism. Thomas Paine. Like Jefferson, Thomas Paine was a Francophile. His critique of Burke in his Rights of Man, 1791, was straightforwardly liberal, egalitarian, anti-royalist, and vociferous. The true origin of rights is God and nature. History is irrelevant. The social contract is agreed upon constitution, and the government is its subsequent tool. Natural right pertain to man in right of his existence. This is according to reason, as opposed to governments which arise out of superstition or conquest. Civil rights pertaining to man are all based in the natural rights. The natural assembly, the tier's estate, is the nation and holds all rights. All hereditary rights and all mixed government are irrational violations of the rights of the nation. It is utterly clear that hereditary monarchy can make no claim to putting authority in the hands of the most merited, virtuous, or talented. Perhaps the core of Paine's differences with Burke is that he believes that reason and history are in conflict. Burke is literally irrational. Paine argues, believing in emotion and sentiment and historical contingencies above argument. Tradition is bad. It cannot bind future generations because each generation is free according to natural law. The rational Enlightenment view is to put power in the hands of the living person to exercise their reason as to what persons and policies will best rule their futures. Like Jefferson, Paine believes that the past is dead and should not weigh on the living. Freedom and historical continuity are incompatible. The origin of rights, which is the basis of government, is not history, but God's grant of them to our nature by natural law. Every person is equal because related in the same degree to God and derives his experiences from God. No generation possesses the right of power of binding or controlling posterity. There can be no hereditary power of kings or aristocracy or of a historical decision. Mary Wollstonecraft, an independent writer and educator, published her response to Burke, A Vindication of the Rights of Man, in 1790. It was followed in 1792 by her Vindication of the Rights of Woman. In the first vindication, Wollstonecraft's arguments were straight from the liberal Republican tradition, that is, a combination of a commitment to liberty and a Republican commitment to the virtues of self-rule. She endorses the French Revolution, although she is even a bit more egalitarian than Paine. She links hereditary rights to property rights. Burke, she says, is inconsistent. He must condemn all revolutions against hereditary power, which he does not. Equality, universal education, and the breaking up of the hereditary estates and the church's property and monopoly on education would completely redistribute property and would make England an Eden. The property of the great is a motivation for all to ape the highest class, but she accepts that property should be fluctuating, implying that it is the locking up of property in inheritance that is the problem. She accepts that the only security of property that nature authorizes and reason sanctions is the right of man has to enjoy the acquisition which his talents and industry have acquired, and to be bequeathed them to whom he chooses. This is against the luxury and effeminacy of inherited wealth. Wollstonecraft's second vindication is of greater interest because of its uniqueness. In it, she points out that half the human race has been denied the new rights of man. Women have been systematically educated not to be free or independent. This is a violation of both rights and utility. It is ruinous for society, making women inferior wives, mothers, and citizens. Her positive argument is simple. There is only one God and hence one hierarchy of virtues for God's image on earth, humanity. Male and female serve the same God and must seek to model themselves after the same standards. All humans must be taught honesty, industry, courage, independence, knowledge, and self-denial. But in the current system, women are systematically prevented from the education of the mind and independence and educated instead for dependence and childishness. The chivalrous uplift of women has the more refined sex functions to degrade them. The inculcation of personal reserve and modesty prevents any passion for ideas, social justice, or artistic creativity. We are educating half of the human race not to develop their capability or potential contribution to society. This miseducation slows the advance of mankind, renders women's own raising of children inadequate, and makes their marriages, once the fires of early romance die, fall to nothing. Alright guys, so I really hope you like this lecture and let me know what you think of it, and goodbye.